Masechet Menaḥot Daf Tet Zayin. Nu Mishnah, pigel bakometz velo balevona velo bakometz. Rabbi Meir omer pigul v'chayavin alav karet. Chachamim omrim en bo karet ad sheyefagel bechol hamatir. We saw this concept and this Mishnah already before. The question is regarding something that has two matirim. So that's for a standard korban mincha. In order for the flour to be permitted to be eaten by the kohanim, one has to burn both the kometz of flour and also the levona. So, therefore, according to the Rabbi Meir, if one had pigul intention only during the burning of the kometz, but not during the burning of the levona, or the other way around, only when he burnt the levona, he had in mind that he's going to eat the flour tomorrow, but he did not have such intention during the kometz. His kometz intention was fine. Rabbi Meir says it is pigul and one is liable to karet if they eat the flour, because according to Rabbi Meir, even pigul intention for one of two matirim will make the result pigul. Hachamim omerim en bo karet ad shefagel bekol hamatir. Hachamim disagree and they say no, there is no karet unless one has pigul intention regarding all of the matir. And in a case where there's two matirim, he would have to have intention regarding both the burning of the kometz and the burning of the levona, in order for the flour to be pigul and someone who ate the flour to be liable to karet. Umodim chachamim l'Rabbi Meir b'minchat choteh b'minchat kenaot she'im pigel b'kometz shu pigul v'chayivin alav karet she'akometz hu matir. Chachamim agree with Rabbi Meir when it comes to the korban mincha of a choteh, a sinner that's olev yored and he's poor and he brings only flour. Well, that one is only flour. There is no levona. And also minchat kenaot of a sotah also is only flour and has no levona. So since in these cases there is no levona, and so there's only one matir, the matir is only the burning of the kometz. So in that case, if he has a pigul intention during the burning of the kometz, then it is pigul, and one is liable to karet because the kometz is the only matir. So obviously there's nothing else to wait for, and that would be only a case of only one matir. שחט אחד מן הכבשים לאכול שתי חלות למחר. הקטיר אחד מן הבזיחים לאכול שני סדרים למחר. רבי מאיר אומר פיגול וחייבים עליו כרת. חכמים אומרים אין בו כרת עד שיפגל בכל המתיר. Another application of the same machloket, same principles, when it comes to the kebasim on Shavuot, where you have to do shechita of both kebasim and sprinkle the blood of both of them in order to eat the two wheat loaves on Shavuot. If he has in mind, however, during shechita of only one of the kevasim that is going to eat the halot tomorrow, they have to be in the same day, so that's pigul intention regarding only one of two matirim. Or if he burned only one of the bazichin, the bowls of frankincense, having in mind that he's going to eat the 12 loaves of the lechem panim tomorrow, but there's two bazichim, and both of them are matirim. So again here, the Rabbi Meir says, even though he only had pigul intention for one of the two matirim, nevertheless, the resulted loaves are pigul, and if one ate them, one would be liable to karet. Hachamim, however, say, no, is no karet unless he has pigul intention regarding both of the matirim. That would mean during the shechita of both of the kevasim or the burning of both of the bazichim. Shachat echad min hakebasim lechol menu lemachar hu pigul v'chabero kasher. If someone did shechita regarding one of the kevasim on Shavuot, having in mind that he's going to eat from that keves, eating the meat of that keves tomorrow, has to be in that day, that's pigul intention, and that animal is pigul, while the other animal is kasher. The reason here is that everybody would agree, even chachamim, is because the kebes is also the matir for itself. That is, the blood of the kebes, you do shechita, you take the blood and you sprinkle the blood of that kebes, that permits the rest of the meat to be eaten. So it is its own matir when it comes to its own meat. So therefore, that one intention just for pigul status, for pigul intention for just the kebes will make the kebes itself liable to pigul. But it has no effect on the other one because one matir is not going to make pigul a different matir. If he has in mind while he's doing shechita of one keves, he doesn't have any pigul intention regarding that keves, but rather only the other one, then both of them are kosher, because since he's doing this one here, keves A, with intention to eat keves B tomorrow, that has no effect, because one matir has no effect on another matir, and he didn't have any pigul intention regarding that keves that he's slaughtering, and so therefore both of them are perfectly fine. There is no pigul there. Amar Rav, machloket shenatan et hakomes bishtika v'et haleboda b'machshava. Rav has a chidush now, and it says this machloket between Rabbi Meir and Chachamim is only if he burns the kometz without saying anything, and then the lebona he is with explicit intention. He says that I'm doing this levona so that I will eat of the remainder flour tomorrow. Has to be that order. Aval natan hakometz b'machshava v'et halevona b'shtika dibrei kol pigul shekol ha'oseh al dat rishona hu oseh. But if he burnt the kometz with intention to eat the flour tomorrow, and then the levona, he had said nothing. He said nothing at all. Then everybody would agree, even Chachamim would agree to be with Rabbi Meir, that it is pigul. Why? Because anyone who does an action, it's based on the intention that he had regarding the first action. So therefore, if he starts off with pigul intention in the first action, it doesn't matter which one he does first, whether the kometz or the levona. So it doesn't matter which one he's burning first. That's not the point. Rather, the point is the intention. If his first action, whatever he's burning first, is with pigul intention, and the second one, he's just quiet, then we assume that he's doing the second one with the same intention as the first. And so the pigul intention of the first will carry over to the second. And therefore, both of the matirim have pigul intention, and therefore one would be liable to karet. However, if the first one, he was just quiet, and then, so the first one we can assume was okay. He didn't say anything, so we assume it's okay. Only the second one he had pigul intention. Therefore, that's only one. The second matir is pigul intention. The first one was not. That's where to be made. That's where Chachamim say that there's no karet. Ushmuel amad adayin hu machloket. Shmuel says not so. It is still machloket even in this case. It doesn't matter whether it's first or second, even though he had intention regarding the first thing that he burned as pigul. But then he's quiet in the second. So if he's quiet, so we don't assume that he's continuing the intention from before. It's not explicit enough that it should continue. We say, no, maybe he only had in mind for the first one and then not for the second one. So Shmuel thinks is more lenient, and he thinks Chachamim would disagree and say there's no karet, no matter what the order is. Yatib Rabba v'ka'amar la lehashma'ata. Rava, who's a fourth generation Amoran Bavel, was sitting and repeating the statement of Rav. Rav was a first generation, so a few generations later, he's still repeating it and thinking about it and learning it. And now we're going to have a few challenges against Rav, and the first one is here. Itibe Rav Acha bar Rav Huna l'Rava. Rav Acha bar Rav Huna heard Rava saying this, and he challenged Rava, yes, Rava, about it. Rav Acha bar Rav Huna cites a baraita that says, when do we say that one is liable to pigul, even if one has intention only regarding the kometz and not the levona? Well, that would be true in the first of the three activities, doing the kemitzah. If you do the kemitzah is only done with the flour, there is no kemitzah for the levona. And putting it into a vessel also was only the kometz is put into a vessel, and hiluch, and bringing it close to the mizbeach. All those things are only done with the kometz, and therefore that is the only matir. There is no counterpart for the levona, and therefore having pigul intention regarding any of these three alone, just for the kometz, is going to make the flour pigul. Balo laktara natan et hakometz b'shtika v'et halevona b'machshava. Et hakometz b'machshava et halevona b'shtika. Rabbi Meir omer pigul v'chayvin alav karet. Hachamim omrim en bo karet ad sheyafagel bo kol hamatir. But when it comes to the burning, there's going to be a machloket, because now we have two activities. There's two things that you need to burn, so there's two matirim, and there you're going to have a machloket. And then it gives examples. If one placed the kometz, that is, burned the kometz, without any intention, and the levona, he had intention of pigul. So this is the first was quiet, and the second is pigul. Or the kometz b'machshava, the first thing that he burnt, he placed the kometz onto the mizbeach with pigul intention, and then the levona, he had no specific intention. In both of these cases, Rabbi Meir says it is pigul and one is liable to karet, because Rabbi Meir says even pigul intention for one matir makes it pigul. Hachamim, however, say no, there's no karet unless he has pigul intention with all of the matir, and here is only with half the matir. That's the end of the baraita. Here's the question: Katani miha natan et hakomes b'machshaba ve'et halibona bishtika upelige. One of the examples is where first he has machshava, he has pigul intention, and only after the second one is bishtika. And according to Rav, one should say here that since the beginning of his performance was with a thought of pigul, so we should assume that he's continuing it, and therefore it should be liable to karet in that case. But this baraita says he's not liable to karet in that case, so that's a challenge against the Rav. So Rav said, no, you can interpret it as follows: he burned the kometz with intention of pigul, after he had, just put it in brackets, after he had already burnt the levona bishtika. So really it's shtika first, that case. Well, but we reject this. First of all, that would be the same as the previous case. The previous case was shtika first and then machshava. So now you're going to say, this is machshava after shtika. Well, that's the same as the first case. So why would you say it again? And second of all, there's another baraita that says explicitly achar kach, that says he did it after, and you can't just change the words and said after he had already done it. So those answers are not good. Tirgema Rav Chanina b'shtei de'ot. Rav Chanina explained that it's talking about where there were two intentions because there were two kohanim. So when does Rav say that the first intention continues into the second action? Only when it's the same person, the same kohen is doing both, and so he burns the first thing with intention of pigul. Then he's quiet for the second. We assume he's continuing the same intention. But if it's two different kohanim, one of them came and burnt the kometz, and then he went to take a break. Another kohen came, and you could do that. You could split between two kohanim. The second kohen, and he came, and he had no specific intention. There's no reason to think that the second kohen, who's a different person, maybe he wasn't even there, is continuing the same intention as the first person, and that's where Rav says that it is not liable to pigul. If it was the same one, then it would be liable because he had the same person, and the first intention was pigul, then that would continue. Good, so we answer that question. Tashema, another challenge from another baraita. This baraita says, when do we say that an offering is pigul? When he intends only while performing the first thing to eat it beyond its time. So when is it pigul? When he has intention for the first thing. Only for mizbeach hachitzon. Aval damim hanitanim mizbeach hapenimi. Okay, there's a fundamental distinction between different types of korbanot. Most korbanot, their blood is sprinkled only on the outside mizbeach, the one in the courtyard. And for that, although lecha techila, there's certain korbanot that you should sprinkle once, sometimes twice on two corners, sometimes on four corners. But for all those, if you just sprinkled once, then you have fulfilled the obligation. The korban is acceptable, and so therefore, for all the ones that are in the chitzon, if you have pigul or tension already in the first sprinkling, that is the matir. That is sufficient to make the korban valid, and therefore that is sufficient to make it pigul. And so in that case, no matter what you do after, it doesn't really matter. It's already going to be pigul. That's from his bechachison, where only the first sprinkling matters. However, there are a few different other korbanot where the sprinkling happens also in the kodesh. We're going to list them right now. In these, you have to do all of the sprinklings. If you just do one and don't do the rest of them, it's no good. every single one is necessary. And here they are. Kigon 43 shel Yom Kippurim. On Yom Kippurim, when you bring the bull and the goat of Yom Kippur, the Kohen Gadol, he goes into Kodesh Kodashim, and he sprinkles there. And then he goes outside and sprinkles onto the curtain. And then he sprinkles on the Mizbeach HaPinimi, and then the Mizbeach HaChitzon. So there's 4 different stages, 3 of them in the Hechal, 1 outside. There's 43 sprinklings altogether of that one. V'achat esrei shel pad Kohen Mashuach, v'achat esrei shel pad Helim Davar shel Sibur. And there's also 11 sprinklings of the pad hatat, that if the Kohen Gadol makes a mistake, he has to bring also an inner pad, and there's 11 sprinklings of that. Or if the community makes a mistake, that's the Sanhedrin. They bring a pad, also ha'elem davad, for forgetting a law, and that's also 11 sprinklings. Pigel ben barishona, ben basheniya, ben bashilishit. Rabbi Meir omer, pigol v'chayavin alav karet. Hachamim omerim, en bo karet, ad sheyifagel b'chol hamatir. If he had pigol intention, whether in the first sprinkling, this is applying to the Kodesh Kodashim ones, that are to the Yom Kippur ones. So whether the first sprinkling, which is in Kodesh Kodashim, or the second sprinkling that's onto the Parochet, or the third sprinkling that's in the Mizbeach HaPinimi. Rabbi Meir says, in any of, doesn't matter which one, it is pigul, and one is liable to karet. However, Chachamim say, one's only liable to karet if he had pigul intention for all of the matir, all of that. That means all of the sprinklings, not only the first one. Katanimi hapigel ben barishona ben bashenia ben bashilishit uplige. Now let's focus on the case where it says whether the first or second or third. So what if it was only the first? The first set of sprinklings, he had in mind pigul. Second and third, he was quiet. And yet, you see, according to Rav, you should say, in that case, also, we assume that the pigul intention of the first will carry over into the second and third, and he should be liable. But that's not what it says. Hachamim say there's no karet, because he had intention only for the first. And so you see, it does not carry through for the second and the third. Challenge against Rav. And maybe you'll say here also 2 intentions. There's 2 Kohanim Gedolim. If a Kohen Gadol becomes Tameh or dies, then another Kohen Gadol, who's one in waiting, comes and he takes over, because all the service of Yom Kippur has to be done by a Kohen Gadol. And so you could have 2 Kohanim Gedolim if something happens to one in the middle. So maybe you could give the same answer as we did before, so that the first one had intention for the first sprinklings, but then he died. Okay, the second one comes, and he doesn't have intention. And so we don't assume that he would continue the first. Maybe that's what this is talking about. Okay, that answer makes sense according to, there's 2 opinions about if a new Kohen Gadol takes over in the middle, can he continue using the same blood from the bull that the first Kohen did shechita on? One opinion says yes, one opinion says no. If you say the first opinion that says yes, bepad, he has to use a pad, and even if it's the blood of a pad that was sacrificed by the previous Kohen Gadol, he can continue using it. So then you'd say, yes, this would be a proper case, because the first Kohen Gadol, he did the first set, he stopped in the middle, he died. The second Kohen Gadol comes and he can continue from where the first one left off with that blood, and he continues. And that would be a case where even though the first Kohen Gadol had pigul intention for the first sprinklings, the second Kohen Gadol did not, and therefore there's no karet, because he has a new intention. It's fine, that would be a proper answer. But there's another opinion. The other opinion says, if a new Kohen Gadol takes over, he cannot use the blood of the previous Kohen Gadols, the pod of that was slaughtered by the previous Kohen Gadol. Rather, he has to go get his own pod, slaughter his own pod, and start all over again. So therefore, even if he dies, doesn't matter. Every Kohen Gadol that comes in the middle has to start all over again from the beginning. And so then you're going to start again, and he's going to have pigul intention only for the first, but not for the second. So then there should not be a case where one would be liable to pigul for having intention only for the first. And yet the Baraita says that according to Chamim, even if it's it doesn't matter which one, just the first, just the second, or the third, even if it's just the first, then not the second and third, then there's no pigul according to the Braita. But according to Rav, it's the same kohen has to do all of them. So if he had a pigul intention for the first, why doesn't he say? Why doesn't the Braita say it carries over to second and third, and why therefore it should be liable according to Chachamim? אמר רבא, הכא מעסקינן כגון שפיגל בראשונה ושתק בשנייה ופיגל בשלישית. תאמרינן איסא כדעתך כל העושה על דעת ראשונה הוא עושה, מהדר פיגולה בשלישית למלי. Rava says, this Baraita is talking about a case where he had pigul intention for the first set in the Kodesh Kodashim. But then, the ones that go the second set, that go on to the Parochet, he was quiet. Now, if you stop there, you'd say, okay, I guess he's continuing. But then he had explicit pigul intention for the third set on the Mizbeach HaPinimi. Now, why would he have explicit intention in the third? If he just wanted to continue from the first, then he wouldn't say anything for the second or third. So if you say that whoever does based on the first thing he continues to do, then why would he have intention again for the third? The fact that intention for the third means that for the second one, he did not have pigul intention. And so that's the case where the Braita says that he is not liable for karet. So interestingly, it's actually worse if you have pigul intention for the first, but not the second and third. Then Rav would say, we continue your intention, and it would be karet. But if you have intention explicitly for the first and third, then you say, well, I guess if you restarted the third, that means the second wasn't. And that's the case of the Baraita. That's Rava's answer. Matkif la Rav Asher. Midi shatak katane. Rav Asher says, doesn't say shatak, that he was quiet in the middle in the second one. Ela ma Rav Asher. Hacha ma'eskinan kegon shepigel. Barishona ubashiniya ubashilishit. Tamrina nisa kadatech kol aseh al dat rishona hu oseh. Miadar pigule bashiniya bashilishit la mali. So Rav Asher says, since it says the first or the second or the third, you can't say it's talking about a case where he had the first and third, but not the second. That doesn't fit with the words of the Braita. Rather, Rav Asher says, it's talking about a case where he had pigul intention. Now, there's a couple of different versions here. One of the versions doesn't have bashilishit here and here. So if we skip that, we could read it as follows. He had pigul intention for the first and second, but not the third. So 2 in a row. So then you don't have to say, and he was quiet in the middle. So it's easier to read into the Braita. So you had first and the second, but not the third. Because then we say, if you say that everyone continues the intention they had in the first one, why would he bother repeating his pigul intention in the second? From the fact that he had it in the first and second and not the third, that means the third is out. Okay, that would be that version. If you have this version that says 1, 2, and 3, then you could say the one that he doesn't have is the fourth. The fourth sprinkling is the one on the outside Mizbeach. So he had intention for the first, second, and third, but not the fourth. That's the case of the Baraita. And you say, well, if you continue the same intention, then he should have just had intention in the first and said, okay, and etc. But the fact the intention for the first, second, and third means the fourth he does not want to have intention. And so that's the case of the Baraita, is when he had intention for the first and second and third. But if he had intention only for the first and not the rest of them, then indeed, according to Rav, well, he would be liable to karet. But we reject this too. Ben ketane. The Braita says the first or the second or the third. It doesn't say all of them. So this is also a difficult reading to fit into the words. And it sounds like really the Braita is talking about a case where he had intention of pigul only for the first or only for the third. But one of those cases is in fact only for the first. And yet the Braita says not pigul. But according to Rav, that should be pigul, and so we leave that with a challenge. Amar Mor, Rabbi Meir Omer, pigul v'chayvin alav karet. Now we go back to the Braita to analyze further Rabbi Meir's opinion that if one has pigul intention even for just one of the matirim, it is pigul. We're going to ask now, not from a case of 2 different matirim, like 2 kivasim that you have to bring in order to permit the lechem, but rather we're going to ask from the process of the 4 different things you have to do for a korban, and then the various sprinklings that you have to do. Though all those are matirin, so you're going to have to do all the sprinklings that are necessary for korban to be permitted are also matirin. Now we know the general rule about pigul is that It's only pigul and chayav karet if you did everything else correctly. Mikadi karet lo mechayev ad shekribu kol hamatirin. One would not be liable unless you sacrifice all of the matirin. So any of the things you have to do from shechita on, or the sprinklings that one has to do. Tamar mor yeraseh karsaat kasher kacharsaat pasul. Since the pasuk says it shall not be accepted, and that's regarding pigul, that means that it has to be otherwise acceptable. Everything has to be done correctly, like it was kosher. So too for pigul, it's only karet if the only problem you have was the pigul intention, but everything else was good. If there's another pasul, then actually, ironically, it's actually better, and one would not be liable to karet for pigul if there was another pasul. So just like in order for a sacrifice to be kosher, you have to sacrifice, do all of the steps to make it for it to be a matir. So too, in order for it to be pasul, meaning pigul, and liable to karet, only if you perform all of the necessary steps. Now we ask, v'hai kivan dechashi ba bifnim pasle. Ki madeh bahechal maya be'almahu deka madeh. Now we're going to ask from the inner sacrifices that are burnt in the hechal. Once he has pigul intention for, let's say, the Yom Kippur one, he has pigul intention when he sprinkles in the Kodesh Kodashim. So now it's already pasul because he had wrong intention. Okay, so that's pigul intention. Now when he does the next sprinkling, and he goes into the Kodesh and sprinkles, now what is he sprinkling? It's water. It's blood, but halachically, it's already no good. And so therefore, the sprinkling that he does next is not a valid sprinkling. It's as if he's sprinkling just water. And therefore, he is not fulfilling all of the steps necessary for a kosher one. And if he's not fulfilling all the steps necessary for a kosher korban, then also it will not become pigul. Okay, so then how could you have pigul according to Rabbi Meir in the case of an inner chatat? Amar Rabba, mashkachat la barba'a parim barba'a seirim. Rabba says, we could have a case where the same Kohen Gadol brings 4 different parim and 4 different seirim. How could that be? He brings a par and a seir, and he does the sprinkling in the Kodesh Kodashim, and he has pigul intention, and then that blood spills out. Okay, if in a proper case, if the blood spills out, he just goes back and gets another pod or another sa'ir, does shechita, and then he can go and continue from the next step. If he did all of the 7 required sprinklings from the previous step. And so he did the first set in the Kodesh Kodashim with pigul intention. So now the only problem there is pigul intention. Now the next set he needs to do properly in order for it to become pigul. So it spills out. He gets some more blood, and now this is fresh blood. So this is from new, and now he's actually sprinkling blood, not just water, because it's totally new. Nothing wrong with this one. And he goes ahead and does the next step and sprinkles it in the Kodesh, and he does it on the Mizbeach. And then that's the third one. And then the fourth one he takes to the outside Mizbeach. So that's the case where he does everything else correctly. And the only problem is that one sprinkling that he did in Kodesh Kodashim with pigul intention, since that's the only problem, therefore it's pigul and liable to karet. So we have a case. Rava Amar, afilu tema par echad v'seir echad lefagule meraseh. Rava says, no, you don't have to go through all that. You can even say it's 1 par and 1 sa'ir and use the same blood the whole way through. And when we say everything else has to be done properly, it means properly except for the pigul intention. And so he had pigul intention. You're right. He had pigul intention for the first sprinkling. So that already is going to make the next one invalid for a kosher korban. But it's but it's valid as pigul. So even though you're doing like shechita, you do shechita with pigul intention. Okay, it's improper. It's not a valid korban because it had pigul. But the shechita itself is in its act a valid shechita. So too here, even if using the same blood, we don't say that the second one is just water. It's true in terms of being a kosher korban, it's just water. It's not valid. But in terms of its being pigul, still the only thing that you did wrong was the pigul intention, and therefore, even if you use the same blood all along, it does in fact remain pigul. Arba'im v'shalosh, back to the baraita that mentioned that there are 43 sprinklings of blood on Yom Kippur, of the blood and the goat. That's all in the inside of the Kodesh. V'hatanya arba'im v'sheba. Wait a second, there's another baraita that says 47, not 43. La kashya hakeman damar me'arbin la keranot v'hakeman damar en me'arbin. If you say that we mix the blood of the bull and the goat before we place the blood on the corners, then you'll have 4 less. That's it, you get 43. But if you do not sprinkle them, the bloods, at that point, but rather only after the putting on the 4 corners, then you'll get 47. Okay, how do you get these numbers? Well, there's 8 times that the blood of the bull is sprinkled in the Kodesh Kodashim, and also 8 times for the goat. So that's 16. And then you move out and you sprinkle onto the parochet. That's also 8 of the bull and 8 of the goat. So that's 32. Then, if you say that you join them together at that point, so if you mix them together, so now you have the bull and the goat blood together, and then there's 4 on each of the corners of the Mizbach HaPinimi, and then 7 on top. So that adds 11, so 32 plus 11, that's how you get 43. If you do not combine them at that point, but you put them on the tops separately, on the corners separately, so then that would be the 32 from before, plus 8, that's on the corners, and then 7 more, that's on top, and you get 47. Wait, there's yet another braita that says 48. La kashya hakeman damar shiraim akebin, hakeman damar shiraim lo me'akebin. This braita says 48 is following the opinion that says the pouring of the remainder of the blood onto the base is necessary. If so, then that's counted as yet another sprinkling. It's a pouring, but it's another thing that you have to do, and therefore that would make it 48, you would add 1. But according to the other opinion that says pouring of the remainder is you should do it, it's a mitzvah, but if you don't do it, it's still okay, then you don't count that, and that's how you have 47. Pigel beholacha mahu. Next question is, if someone had pigul intention during the holacha, during the bringing of just the komets to the corner of the mizbeach, but he did not have intention of pigul when bringing the levona. The levona also has to get to the mizbeach, so it could be burnt. But he did not have improper intention for that, but only for the komets. What is the status? Is that going to be considered just one of 2 matirim? What will the chachamim say in this case? Amar Rabbi Yochanan holacha kikmitza, v'resh Lakish amar holacha kehaktara. Machloket Rabbi Yochanan says that the bringing of it is like the kemitza, just like the kemitza is done only with the komets, and so there is no counterpart for levona. Therefore, having pigul intention for the kemitza only will make it pigul, because that is the only thing that you're doing. There is no counterpart for the lebona. And holacha also, the holacha of the komets by itself will make it pigul independent of the levona. That's the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan. In fact, we saw a baraita on the previous Amud that said for those first 3 activities, for the taking of the kemitza, putting it into a vessel, and the holacha, bringing the vessel, there's only one thing done for the komets and not for the lebona, and therefore, if one has pigul intention for the komets, in any of these 3 activities, then it becomes pigul. And so that baraita supports Rabbi Yochanan. We're going to bring that soon as a challenge against Resh Lakish. Resh Lakish says, no, holacha is like haktara. Just like for haktara, you have to have pigul intention for burning both the komets and the levona. So too for holacha, you have to have intention for both, according to Chachamim, in order for it to become pigul. We're going to ask some questions first against Rav, and against Rabbi Yochanan rather. And we say, Rabbi Shbishla ma l'Resh Lakish, ikana meholacha dilbona, ela l'Rabbi Yochanan mai ta'ama, which makes sense according to Resh Lakish, because there is in fact a holacha regarding levona. The levona has to be brought to the mizbech to be burnt, and therefore, since both the kometz and the levona have to be brought, so those are two stages, two different things, and so therefore, according to Chamim, you have to have in mind pigul intention for both of them in order for it to become chayav karet. But Rabbi Yochanan, what will he say? Amar Rava, Kasavar Rabbi Yochanan, Kol avoda she'ena materet, avoda chashuba hi lefagel aleh bifnei atzma. Rabbi Yochanan says, this rule that you have to do both of them is only for a matir, only for something that will make a difference in making it permitted. So regarding the burning, in order for the flour, the remainder of the flour to be permitted to the Kohanim, you have to burn both the kometz and the levona. However, the holacha is not an avodah that will make it mutar. Even if you do the holacha of everything, you bring everything, it's not changing the status of the flour. The flour is still prohibited. So therefore, this is not a matir. And this rule that you have to do both matirim for it to become pigul is only if it's a matir. So therefore, this over here, since it's not a matir, but it is an avodah chashuvah. It's not just a random thing that you're doing on the side. This is a necessary part of the process. Therefore, it is significant enough that it will cause it pigul even by itself, even without the holacha of the levona. Amar le'Abaye, Haresh shechitat echad min hakebasim, d'avodah she'ena matira u'pelige. Abaye challenges Rava's explanation because here you have shechita and shechita of only one of the kebasim on Shavuot. That is not a matir. Once you do shechita, even if you do shechita on both of them, the animal is not yet permitted, the meat of the animal. The loaves are not yet permitted just by doing shechita. So that's not a matir. And yet, we know that having intention for only one of them is not going to make it pigul. Ditnan shachat echad min hakebasim lachol shetechalot lamachar. Iktir echad min habazichin lachol shenesedim lamachar bi meir omer pigul v'chei bin alav karet chamim omerim en bo karet ad shevagel b'chol hamatir. This is the first mishnah that we learned on this daf, that if one did shechita for one of the kebasim, having intention to eat the chalot on the next day outside the time, or if he burned one of the bazichin of the showbread with intention to eat the bread, the loaves, on the next day, Rabbi says it is pigul and one's liable to karet because even one matir is enough for it to be meir. However, Chachamim say that it's not pigul until you do both. To have in mind pigul status while doing shechita on both of the kevasim or burning both of the bazichim. So here the question is from the shechita. So the shechita is not a matir, and yet Chachamim require that you have to have pigul intention for both of them. אמר לה, מי סברת לחם בתנור קדוש שחיטת כבשים מקדש עליה והבא לקדש כבא להתיר דמה. Now we have a renewed definition of what matir is. Matir is not just that it doesn't only mean that it makes something permitted for consumption by a person, or that it could burn the emurim on the mizbeach. It also means if that act raises something to a higher level of kedusha. So the bread that you bring along with the kebasim, the 2 loaves of wheat, do you think that they become holy just by baking them in the oven? You're just baking them. They're just regular breads. But rather, you bake them in the oven, and then when you do the shechita on the kevasim, that makes the breads holy. And something that now becomes holy is the same law as something that is a matir. And the breads are only going to become holy if you do shechita on both of the kebasim. And so actually this is a matir, or just like a matir. It does effectuate the change of status of the other thing. And therefore, for shechita, you need, in fact, both. But for halacha, that doesn't change the status of anything. So for halacha, even doing halacha of one will make it pigul. Mativ Rav Shimi bar Asher, another challenge against Rabbi Yochanan. Acherim omrim hikdim mulim la'arelim kasher, hikdim arelim lemulim pasul. We have a braita regarding Korban Pesach. Korban Pesach, when you do shechita, you have to have intention for people who can actually eat it. Only men who are circumcised can eat it, but men who are not circumcised cannot eat Korban Pesach. And so, if one has in mind only people are not circumcised, then it's no good. But according to Tanakama, not quoted here, if you have in mind both together, circumcised and uncircumcised, then, okay, you have the whole group. There's some people in the group that can eat it, so that's okay. Acharim say, no, it depends on the order. As you're doing shechita, there's two pipes that you have to sever. And so if while doing it, first you have in mind mulim, and you cut the first pipe, and then you have adelim in mind, then it's okay, because you had mulim first. But if you did adelim first, and then the second pipe for mulim, then it's no good, because you had the adelim first. Now, in the discussion about this in Masechet Pesachim, what is the argument about? They're arguing about the status of a chatzi matir. We're considering each pipe that in order to do proper shechita, you have to cut both of the pipes. So if you cut only one of the pipes with proper intention and not the other ones, so that's called chatzi matir. So that they were arguing on chatzi matir. And yet, that's talking about the stage of shechita. And over there's no like breads or loaves or anything else that's becoming higher in status. So you can't give the same answer as we did above. And so why would you have a question of chatzi matir regarding shechita according to your answer, Rava, since shechita does not elevate anything when a korban pesach, it doesn't make anything permitted, it's not yet permitted, just doing shechita, you're still going to have to do the sprinkling of the blood. Amar le, mi severat dam besavar behema kadosh, dam sakin mekadesha le, v'vaba lekadesh keba lehatir dameh. So do you think that the blood that's in the neck of the animal is sanctified just by itself, just by being there? No. The blood, it's only when through the cutting of the knife, that's what makes it holy. And anything that comes to become holy is the same as something that is becoming mutar. And therefore, the shechita of the Korban Pesach here is in fact a matir. Not a matir in the sense that it makes something permitted, nothing yet is permitted, but in the sense that it sanctifies something. The blood that's in the animal is not usable for sprinkling before you do the shechita. It's not yet holy, just because it's in an animal that was designated. It only becomes holy and now is permitted, can be used to burn, to sprinkle on the mizbeach. It becomes a higher level of holiness through the shechita. So the shechita is a kind of matir. Therefore, in this case, the shechita, in fact, is a matir. It is affecting a significant change. And therefore, cutting only one of the two pipes in the throat is going to be half a matir. And so that the machloket there revolves around whether half a matir is enough, or because it is a matir, it is an act that is changing the status of the blood, do you need the full matir to be done properly? Tashema. My love hiluch dehaktara. And now we bring the baraita from Amud Aleph as a challenge against Resh Lakish. It said, when do we say that intent of pigul regarding only the kemitzah is enough to make it pigul? That's true for the first three stages of kemitzah, putting into a kli and hiluch. So when we say hiluch, we assume that means the hiluch of the of what you're going to burn, bringing that to the mizbeach, right? The kometz, you bring it to the mizbeach to burn, and it says the hiluch of just the kometz is sufficient to make it pigul, independent of the holacha for the levona. And so that's a challenge against Resh Lakish. La hiluch de matan keli. No, we weren't talking about bringing the keli, the second vessel that you put the kometz into the mizbeach, but rather we're talking about bringing the kometz itself to a kli. He did the kemitzah, and he didn't have the other vessel ready nearby, and so he has to take the kemitzah. It's in his hand. Oh, where's the other vessel? Oh, it's over there, all on the other side of the room. Okay, now he has to bring it. So this is actually the initial placing into the kometz into that second vessel. That's the holacha. You're walking it to the second vessel. It's not talking about the walking that you're bringing it to the mizbeach. And so that walking of bringing the kometz into that first vessel, that's something that you'd only do for the kometz and not for the levona. And so therefore this one has no counterpart. That's how Resh Lakish interprets the hiluch. Is not the normal hiluch that you usually think of. If so, the order is wrong. It should say, why does it say matan keli and then hiluch? It should say hiluch and then matan keli if it's talking about the conveying of the kometz to the keli. Halakashia tenehachi. Oh, that's not a question. Change the order and make it say in that order. Okay. Balo l'haktara, balo l'holachami ba'eleh. Okay, if you look at the next part of that baraita, it says, then he comes to burn it. But the next thing that you're doing is not burning it. Then since you didn't do the holacha yet of the kli, it should say, when he comes to do the holacha. That should be the next step. Halakashia. Kevan de holacha sorech haktara karila haktara. That's not a question either. Since you're only bringing it so that you can burn it, therefore the holacha is also called haktara. It's part of the haktara. That's why the baraita did not list the holacha separately. Ela natanat hakomes bishtika holich mi ba'ele kashya. But then the next part of the baraita says, if he placed the kometz on the fire bishtika, quietly. But the next thing is not the placing on the fire, it's holich mi ba'eleh. If he should say the next thing that he did is holich, and it skipped that holich, where it definitely should mention it if he didn't do the official holacha yet. Kashya, in fact, this is a serious challenge against Resh Lakish. We should clarify something about the holacha that we were just talking about. Actually, the kemitzah already has to be done at the southwest corner of the mizbeach. So it's already there, even from the first step. So you have the big bowl with all the flour in it and the oil mixed together, and the frankincense is there on the side. And that's the first thing you're doing is kemitzah. It's already there near the corner. Nevertheless, at that point, you have to take the kometz and you have to put it into a second vessel. Okay, good. Let's assume the second vessel is already also there. So you're there at the southwest corner. But the holacha will still mean that you have to bring it up the ramp. You have to go to the fire that you're going to put it on. So even if it's not a long distance, that is still the holacha, and that still will be necessary for the kometz and for the levona, as we just spoke about. Now the last part of the sugya, hiktir shumshum le'echol shumshum ad shekala kometz kulo. You have a case where the kohen is burning the kometz, but instead of the burning the kometz all at once, let's say he burnt the kometz all together, which is a normal way to do it, having in mind that he's going to eat the remainder tomorrow. That's the classic case of pigul. But here, he burns a tiny bit at a time. How much? The size of a sesame seed. He takes a little piece of the dough, the size of a sesame seed of the kometz, and burns it on the fire, having in mind, I'm going to eat a tiny bit of the remainder tomorrow. How much? A sesame seed's worth. Okay, he keeps doing that. It'll take him a while to burn the whole kometz, but for each sesame seed size of kometz that he burns, he has in mind he's going to eat only a sesame-sized amount of the flour. Now, the pigul only takes effect if one has in mind at least a kezayit. The question here, does it add up? He keeps doing this until he burns the entire kometz. So by the end, all of the kometz is burnt, having in mind to eat all of the remainder. By the time you add up all those little pieces that he had in mind about, it ends up being more than a kezayit. So you have, by the end, if you count it all together, it would be pigul. But that's the question. Do you count it all together, or do you look at each individual act, which each individual act is not sufficient? Rav Chisda v'Rav Hamnuna v'Rav Sheshat. Chad amar pigul, v'chad amar pasul, v'chad amar kasher. There's a three-way machloket here. One of these sages says it is pigul. One says it's not pigul, but it's just pasul. And the other says it's totally fine, totally kasher. Let's propose that the one who says it is pigul is Rabbi Meir. Just like Rabbi Meir would say that something can become pigul even if you just have half of the matir. If there's two kebasim and you just do one with improper intention, it's pigul. So too, he would say that could apply also to a small piece of one. Umanda amar pasul kerabanan. And the one that says pasul, that would be Rabbanan, who say, in the same case as Rabbi Meir, remember Rabbanan, if you do one keves, shechita, or of one keves, having in mind pigul intention, it's not pigul, but it is pasul. So Rabbanan would say, just like when you offer one of the kevasim, so part of the matir, It'll be pasul, but not pigul. So too, here you're also taking part and part, sesame seed at a time. That's pasul, but not pigul. Uman damar kasher kerebi. And the one who says it's totally okay, that's like Rabbi, who said on Daf Yud Dalid that if you have one of the lambs and you do shechita, having in mind, with this lamb, I'm going to eat half a kezait of a loaf. And that the other lamb, also you have in mind, I'm doing shechita to eat half a kezait of a loaf. Rabbi said, they don't combine. Okay, you don't combine the intention of two different acts. If each one is only a chasi shiur, they do not combine together. So here also, you're doing multiple acts of burning the komets, but each one is only for a little bit, less than a kezayit, and they don't add up together. Therefore, there is no intent. Improper intention is nothing. It doesn't add up to a kezayit, and therefore there's no pigul at all. It's totally kosher. Mimai. Wait a second. That's not necessarily true. Dilmad kan lo kama Rabbi Meir hatam ela dechishe b'shi'ura. Maybe Rabbi Meir only said in the regular case when you when you did shechita on one of the kevasim, because there you were thinking about a full kezayit at that time, and so that's why that's sufficient. But here you're not thinking of an entire measure; you're only thinking of one sesame seed, and so that's not going to add up. You have to be thinking, okay, fine, one matir, but it has to be one matir about a full kezait, and you don't have that here. So maybe the Bimeir would not say spigul here. Vad kan lo kam amri rabbanan hatam ela de lachishe ba bekule matir, aval hachadichishe ba bekule matir hachinami de pagil. And maybe Rabbanan would say in the regular case of that's already regular, that case of the two kevasim, where you are not having pigul intention regarding all of the matir. You're only having intention for one of the kevasim and not the other. But here, eventually, by the end, you have improper intention regarding all of the all of the komets. And so it's true, it's a little bit at a time, but by the end, you get the full thing. So maybe Rabbanan would actually say it is pigul in this case. Vad kan lo ka amad Rabbi hatam ela de la hadar malye meota avoda aval hachad hadar malye meota avoda hachiname de pasil. And maybe Rabbi was only lenient when he said when you had one kevis for half a kezait and one hefes for half a kezait, because he never went back and filled out the full shiur from that one keves. There was one keves, have in mind a half a kezait, and then he left it at that. So they don't join together. But here, eventually, he added more and more until he had in mind with the entire komets. He had in mind eventually the whole kezait of the remainder. So he filled it in by the end. And so maybe even Rabbi, who was said as kosher there, would say over here, it's not good. Rather, in fact, any of these three opinions can be the opinions of all of the Tanaim. In other words, any of the three Amoraim who talk about this case of the sesame seeds, we can explain according to all of the Tanaim, the Chachamim, the Bimeir, or the B. One says Pasul, we can explain to all three of them, and one who says Kasher, we can explain according to all three of them, because it has nothing to do with Chatzi Matir. Rather, as follows: Man damar pigul divrei hakol kasabar derech achila bekach v'derech haktara bekach. The one who says it is pigul would say that this is called a way of eating little by little, and also it's a way of burning little by little. So okay, you did it little by little. Who says you have to do it all at once? You could do it part by part. You could do a sesame seed at a time. So it is called burning. It's a proper burning, and what you had in mind, the pigul intention of eating a little bit at a time, is called proper eating, and therefore, since you did a proper burning with intention of doing a proper eating, but past the time, that's pigul. Uman damar pasul divrei hakol kasabar en derech achila bekach ve'en derech haktara bekach v'havai la kemincha shelo huktara. And the one who says it's pasul, that also could follow everyone, because this would say that this is not the normal way of eating. Actually, this doesn't matter whether it's eating or not. The main thing is that it's not the way of burning And since this is not the way of burning, you don't call burning a sesame seed at a time a fulfillment of the mitzvah of burning the kometz. And since it's not burnt properly, it's considered as if it's not burnt. If you have a korban mincha, you do everything else, but you don't burn the kometz. It got lost or something. It's no good. It's pasul. And so it actually doesn't matter what your intention is. You could have best intention in the world. It happens to, here, and derech achila b'kach, even if this is not the way of eating, so therefore the eating intention is not a problem. Even so, it's not burning, and so you didn't burn it, it's pasul. And the one who says it's kosher also could be according to any of the Tannaitic opinions, and that they would say that the way is the way of burning. So you did burn it properly, even though it's little by little. But it's not a way of eating to eat a sesame seed at a time. And therefore, your intention to eat a sesame seed at a time tomorrow is not a valid intention. That's not a way of eating. So it's like you had in mind just nonsense. And therefore, since your improper intention was nonsensical, was not an act of eating, therefore we can ignore it. And so you did a proper burning, and we ignore the improper intention, and therefore it's totally kosher. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen ve'amen.